Welcome to the ACHIA Advanced QI class. If you participated in one of our collaboratives in the past, then you're in the right place. If, however, this is your first time in a collaborative with ACHIA, we ask that you go to the basic QI class that's stored on the website with this advanced class. For our advanced class, we are going to be discussing advanced process mapping. I do have one disclosure, and that is that I will discuss a commercial product that is featured in some work of a former team that's been in an earlier collaborative. I will not discuss non-FDA approved use of products or providers of services, and I do not have any relevant financial relationships or affiliations with any commercial interest. Today, we are going to do a brief review of the model for improvement, a brief review of process mapping, and since you've been in a collaborative before, you know how much fun that is with Post-it notes and pencils and white paper. We're going to learn some new things. We're going to learn about the benefits of swim lane mapping. Some of you have done that before. We're going to learn two advanced process maps. One is a simplified failure mode effects analysis, and the final map will be mapping the patient journey. So let's dive right into the model for improvement. The model for improvement is the model of quality improvement that we use in ACHIA. It is 3 questions and a cycle. So let's quickly review the questions. What are we trying to accomplish? This is our goal, or our aim statement. The second question is, how will we know that a change is an improvement? This is, of course, our measures. And finally, what change can we make that will result in improvement? And here's where we start brainstorming some change ideas. After the 3 questions, we look at the cycle, the plan, do, study, act cycle. And these are just rapid tests of change that help us work out kinks in our change ideas before we implement them to the full practice. So you may be wondering, how does process mapping fit in this model for improvement? Well, a process map fits right here in the 3rd question of what change can we make that will result in improvement. So just to remind you, when you've been through past collaboratives and we've looked at your process, we've placed your process with Post-it notes on exam paper in one color of Post-it notes, and then we thought of change ideas in another color. And we'll be talking about that as we talk about advanced process maps as well. Let's review what a process map is. First of all, you know what a map is, and this slide comes from a home visiting collaborative. A map is a picture of our chart that shows the different parts of something. It can be really high level, like the globe or the map of the U.S., or it can be very detailed, like a state or a city or even a community. So you know what a map is. What's a process? A process may be a little harder to define in words, but simply it's a series of actions or operations that come to an end. So that is a process. When you put the 2 together, you get a high-level process map. And this map is very simple, kind of on the globe or the state level or the country level. And this just shows waking up and getting ready and going to work. And this slide actually comes from Improve Care Now, which is a collaborative that's led through Cincinnati Children's. The next slide also comes from Cincinnati Children's, and it shows a more detailed process map where you wake up, you decide what the weather's like outside so you can decide what you want to wear, and you decide if it's Monday and you need extra coffee. And so there's a lot more steps in this process map. For the most part, for our purposes, we tend to stay fairly high level with process maps. So let's just remind you what a process map from an ACHIA collaborative typically looks like. This is a process map from a practice who was involved in our HPV collaborative. And in the yellow Post-it notes, you see their current process. Now, this practice has a fairly highly reliable process, and they only decided on 3 change ideas, which are demonstrated in pink. This practice also decided to display their protocol on their process map. So this is a nice, simple process map. Some of you in the past have decided to use swim lanes, and we've used swim lanes back when we were working with the American Academy of Pediatrics with the national office. So let's talk a little bit about swim lanes and when we should use them, why we should use them, and how to actually use them. So when should we use them? We can actually use them anytime in an improvement initiative. If we use them at the beginning, it helps very early on to assign responsibility and accountability to everybody's role. So you'll notice on this swim lane, when you look to the left, that there are roles identified of nurse, providers, a technician, the fellows, the research team, and then practice support or administrative support. So everybody has their responsibility clearly defined. You may find that you're in the middle of an initiative and there are clearly some members of your practice who need reminders. And that's a great time to decide we're going to change our process map into a swim lane. It's also a good idea to do a swim lane at the end of an initiative when you know each step that every person in your practice should be responsible for. Now, why do you want to use a swim lane versus a simple process map? I've kind of already said it when I talked about when to use, but let's just review it again. It helps you to assign responsibility and therefore accountability. It helps review roles, and it's a great tool to post as a reminder for everyone in your practice. Now, how can you develop a swim lane like this? It looks really hard. Well, you can still use Post-its and exam paper and markers. You simply need to take your exam paper. Your additional tool would be a yardstick to help you draw lines and involve more people in your practice and have them put Post-it notes in different colors. We do have some resources for swim lanes posted on the ACHIA website. We have a sample swim lane which you can alter. We have a process map tutorial and an Excel template swim lane. Some people also like to use PowerPoint for their swim lane. So that's just a quick review of swim lanes. Now we're going to talk about something that's a little more advanced, and that's the failure mode effects analysis. Cincinnati Children's has actually figured out a way to simplify the failure mode effects analysis. And this is actually a photo of the tool that you'll be able to use if you decide to use what's called an FMEA. And what you see here is in the center in black is where you will put your high-level current process. In red, below the black, you have the opportunity to include failure modes. And those are bits of your process that aren't working correctly, and we'll look more closely at that when we look at some examples. And then above the black line, above your process, you can brainstorm ways to help prevent the failure. So let's look at a completed FMEA, and we'll start talking about when to use and why to use. So when do you want to use this particular process map? It's great at the beginning when you have those practice members who are saying, we can't change because. Then you get to respond, you are right, that will be a problem. Let's do an FMEA. It's also a good opportunity to use an FMEA when you have really done a good job with your process and you're fairly reliable and you'd like to be even better. So you can, again, look at bits of your process that you can improve. So why do you want to use this failure mode effects analysis? As I've already said, it's a great tool to help acknowledge those people who don't like to change or who really do have a good objection to a change that you've brought up, and you can help them be part of the solution. So good time to use it at the beginning, and again sometimes in the middle or in the end. It helps you to increase your reliability and to sustain your process. I'm going to show you in just a moment how you can still use Post-it notes to create what looks like a fairly complicated tool. Now, in this particular FMEA, it's about asthma care, and we're going to look at one step. It's the fourth step into the process where the provider does the H&P and documents, and the provider is really forgetting level of control. This is actually something that we found in the Asthma Collaborative, that level of control can often be a difficult piece to remember to document. So on this particular form, you see that one of the solutions was that the asthma control test, or the ACT, is moved to discharge papers when the provider reviews and documents the asthma control test. Now that may sound like a little bit of a lame solution. However, for some practices who use a lot of paper, that works well. Here are some other ideas for improvement. You can select questions that are added to the EMR, or choose select questions from the asthma control test, add them to the EMR, and then they must be answered, and the level of control must be answered before the note can be closed. Most of our EMRs don't work that way. So another practice had an idea that the nurse would score and review the asthma control test with the provider, and then the nurse would stand there until the provider said, okay, I've documented it. And that might be a strategy that helps at the beginning of improvement, and you'll need to be a little more creative as your process becomes the norm in your practice. Now let's look at a situation in my own clinic. It's a very busy clinic where a lot of people don't gain weight well. So we see a combination of process maps here. Our dietitian placed the usual process for her visits with patients who need to gain weight in yellow. And then she added some change ideas in blue. That's the typical process map that you're used to doing with an ACHIA collaborative. Now, what our dietitian found is that when she was trying to make collaborative goal setting with patients in order that they would have like a weight gain goal for their next visit, clinic was sometimes too busy, and she felt like she was interfering with the work of other team members. So she decided that her failure mode was that the clinic was busy and there was not enough time to really spend with the patient. So her solutions to this was that she would let the rest of the team know, hey, I'm going to be in this room a little longer. Please go see other patients and don't wait on me. And she also decided that she should prioritize the patients. And if there were some patients in clinic that had good weight gain or had no weight issues, that she could have not see them at that visit. So this is how an FMEA can be done, again, with Post-it notes, exam paper, and you can see this exam paper is really crumbled up. We've used this a lot. So this is practically used in our clinic all the time. Again, we have some resources for a simplified failure mode effects analysis on the ACHIA website. The IHI toolkit can be found there. You will need to create an IHI, that's the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. You will need to create an account with them, however it's free. And their failure mode effects analysis is not the simplified one. And then the tool that we looked at the beginning of this discussion is the simplified FMEA is on the website. Now finally, we're going to look at what might be the most difficult form of process mapping, and this is the patient journey map. Patient journey maps can be done in a variety of ways. You can look at a patient's journey from diagnosis to this particular point in time. You can look in a day in the life of a patient, and the video that we use for a resource actually does that. You can also have a patient join you and help to annotate your process map, and therefore they're going to include their experience of care. A patient journey map, particularly one that is annotating your own process, is great for collaboratives that involve a specific population like adolescents. You can get a focus group of adolescents who can come in and really tell you what their experience is like. And so when might you want to do a patient journey map? Well, again, you can use at the beginning. That's a great time because that way the patient's involved in design and not just in advising how to improve their experience of care. In healthcare, we are very good at using QI to solve our own problems, and we often neglect looking at what our patients' problems are in our system. You could also decide to use the patient journey map later in the process. Just remember, at that point, it's probably advising and not really having the patient as your partner. Now, why do you want to use this? I've kind of already made that case, and that is you really want to know about the customer's experience. What do they need and what do they desire in their clinical care? It can also help you prioritize your work. As you start out in QI with a new initiative, you usually have lots of ideas and it's hard to decide what to do first. And the patient can help you by saying, I really think this is the priority for most patients. Now, how do you use this? This is really fun to do with a parent or patients or focus group, and use your Post-its and your exam paper again. There's also an alternate way that you can get a perspective of a patient. And we're not going to ask you to do this particular activity, however you might want to think about it at some point. And I've actually done this one on a couple of times, and that's where you as a practice member walk through a visit with your patient. And you will learn a lot about your practice when you do that. But you have to use fresh eyes and see your practice as though you were a new patient. Now let's go back and look at the highly reliable process map that we looked at the beginning and think about what might happen if we had a parent, or in this case, adolescents, giving feedback on adolescent visits and HPV vaccines. We might find that this first step of notifying the patient and parent at the 5-year-old checkup that immunizations will not be due again until 11, we might find that a parent says, I've got to have reminders before the 11-year-old checkup that my child needs immunizations. So that might be one example of how a parent or patients could add information that would be very helpful for you to improve their experience. So here are the resources that we have for the patient journey map on the ACHIA website. There's the video that I mentioned earlier, and then we also have, again, a resource from ACHIA, which is improving the patient experience observation activity. Now, let's quickly review what we've talked about today. We did briefly review the model for improvement, 3 questions and a process. We reviewed briefly how we do process mapping in the ACHIA collaboratives. We talked about the swim lane map and its advantages. We talked about the failure mode effects analysis and when and how and why it should be used. We did the same thing for patient journey. So what do we expect you to do? As advanced QI learners, we really want you to choose one of these advanced maps, and I'm going to just flip through the pictures of those in a moment. And this will be your homework when it's time for the process map homework. So let's just quickly look at these again. We want you to either do a swim lane or a failure mode effects analysis in this simplified form. Or maybe you want to be really creative and do the patient journey. So this is just a picture of a team doing their process map. In this case, they've used a whiteboard. You can do that, but we ask that you take your exam paper and your Post-its and your pencils, and you join us on the journey of advanced process mapping. Gonna take a sentimental journey. It might put your mind at ease. Come on and take a sentimental journey and create new memories. Go forth and do your advanced process map. Thank you.